Greetings from Washington, D.C., and wherever you're watching from, welcome. Thank you so much for your patience. We're excited to have you. And thank you for joining this Employer Spotlight featuring United States Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agricultural Services. All right, that was a mouthful, all right? But you know why you are all here, and we're excited to have you. I'm your host and moderator for today's event, Farron Crawford, and on behalf of the Office of Third Goal and Return Volunteer Services, who's still providing you with career services and events such as these that put you in front of the many wonderful employers who are interested in recruiting and hiring you, specifically for your unique skill set that you gained while in Peace Corps service. We are excited to have you, and we hope that you gain a lot from the opportunity that is present today. So before we jump in and you meet our wonderful panelists that are joining me both live and over the phone, let's go over a couple of housekeeping items. First things first, again, we do apologize for the delay. This is a 60-minute live virtual panel style event. So time is of the essence. As soon as you have those questions that you want our wonderful panelists to answer, please go ahead and start submitting those questions now. You can submit those questions by typing them into the chat dialog box where our great panelists will see them, and we will get to them and answer them as best we can. Also, at any point in time, if you have trouble with the video or audio of this webinar, please go ahead and refresh or just exit out of your browser and just re-enter into this webinar. Don't worry if you miss anything. This is a virtual event that is being recorded and will be housed on our YouTube channel via our RPCV Careers YouTube page. All right, that pretty much covers it. So let's go ahead and get to the main attraction. I'm going to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves, starting by giving us your name and whether or not you were an RPCV, where you served, and tell us what your role is currently at your agency. So I'm going to start with our panelist that's on the phone, Kathy. Kathy, if you would, go ahead and start us off.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Kulik, and I am an HR specialist. I actually work for USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, but I service the Foreign Agricultural Services, Foreign Service Officers, with just general staffing issues and, taking care of all their staffing needs. I've actually worked for the federal government for 28 years now, a very long time. Kind of proud of it, though, too. Started out with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. I worked there for 13 years. Started in their testing department. Then moved over to staffing and helped agencies with their HR needs, doing announcements for them, rating and ranking applicants, issuing lists of eligibles, things like that, helping them interpret HR regulations and rules. And then I was moved into the OPM oversight division, where I actually went to all the different federal HR offices and did oversight reviews with the team. So that was a lot of fun. After that, I went to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Department of Interior as an HR generalist, doing all the staffing work again, doing announcements and all of that entails, hiring applicants and all of that, for 5 years. And I actually had 3 years with them as just a recruiter. They were doing a lot of recruitment to increase the diversity of their workforce. So that was a really fun time too. I enjoyed that a lot. And then I've been working here with USDA APHIS, servicing the Foreign Agricultural Service for the last 4 years. And I really enjoyed that job too.
Oh, wow. There's a wide array of knowledge that you have, 28 years in the federal government. So we're so happy that you're able to join us and share your expertise, especially as it relates to Return Peace Corps volunteers joining the Foreign Agricultural Service. What about you?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Stank. I was not part of the Peace Corps, but I did grow up on a dairy farm in Missouri, and I have a long experience raising cattle and crops on our family farm. I joined the Foreign Agricultural Service in 2002, and I've served in Washington, and Brussels was my first tour, and then I went on to Costa Rica, where I got to know lots of Peace Corps folks, and we had them over for Thanksgiving, and I met them in their field places in Nicaragua and Panama and Costa Rica, and it was always a pleasure to meet with you all there. And then eventually I got to Germany. I spent 5 years in Germany, covering Germany, Austria, Hungary, Slovenia, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. And I got to get in touch with my friend Dwight, who's here today, and we would do big trade shows, and we had a vast portfolio of projects that ranged from trade policy issues to pushing out 87 reports a year on various topics in our region, so it was a big job. Back in Washington, I'm the Foreign Service Trainee Program Coordinator, or the Special Advisor. So I only give special advice, and I will give you the special advice today.
All right. We're looking forward to hearing about it. What about you, Dwight?
Thanks very much. I'm Dwight Wilder. I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Ecuador from 1994 to 1997. I extended for about 6 months, and the best thing out of that was I married my Peace Corps sweetheart, a native Ecuadorian who's now an American citizen. But like Kelly, I am also a foreign service officer with Foreign Agricultural Service, and I've had tours in Buenos Aires, Argentina, followed by Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and then more recently in Kiev, Ukraine, doing very similar work to what Kelly had mentioned before. And one thing that you should be aware of, every office that we have has quite a different, unique mix of work, things that you can involve yourself in. Currently, about a year ago, I moved back to Washington, D.C., and now I'm what's called the Area Director for the Africa and Middle East region. So I supervise all of the Foreign Service officers who are serving in our embassies and consulates across Africa and a few Middle Eastern countries. So
that is a lot. Thank you so much. So as you can tell, you are in for a real treat. There's a wealth of knowledge here in-house with us. And so I see questions coming in. Again, if you're just now joining us, as we see that there are a few more participants, you're right on time. Start to submit your questions. Let's go ahead and get into what is the Foreign Agriculture Service.
So the Foreign Agricultural Service, our job is to bring U.S. agriculture to the world. And I always explain it as kind of we're a tripod of jobs. So we do trade policy, trade promotion, and capacity building. And capacity building is something you probably in your Peace Corps roles have experienced with food aid projects, McGovern Dole, Food for Progress. That's something we do in a lot of the more developing countries. Another aspect that we do is the analysis and reporting. We put out a tremendous number of reports annually for free to the world. So when you meet that Greek peach exporter, he's like, I don't know why you give this stuff away for free. And I'm like, because we're America, we want to help. So we do a lot of, in different areas, we're a liaison to the government. That's a very important role we play in our posts at the embassies. And it takes a lot of diplomatic soft skills, as we were talking about earlier. What else would you want to add to that list?
You've mentioned capacity building.
That's very important.
We also administer some small short-term scholarship programs to invite natives of countries that we serve in to come to the United States for 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months, depending on the program. Reporting and marketing. So the biggest reason that we have a job is that we're an agricultural powerhouse country here, and we produce way more food than we can possibly consume. So we are out there looking for markets to sell high quality American produced food. So between those 3 pillars that Kelly mentioned, these are probably, I think we could say, the most dynamic jobs that you would have in embassies overseas.
I tell everyone the best job in the embassy is in the ag office.
Absolutely.
We have wins. We do the most important work, which is feeding people, and everybody likes food. So when we have an event and there's food, that brings everybody to the table. So I think that's why we have the best. I mean, Foreign Commercial Service, they're good too, but we are very interesting.
Yeah, but only the agriculture section can be out talking to a rice farmer in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam one day of the week, and then the next day of the week be up in the Capitol talking to the Minister of Agriculture. So it's extremely dynamic. It's quite fun.
Yeah. So a lot of times as RPCVs, we think about foreign service and FSOs, like State Department comes to mind, but you guys are really set apart. So like specifically, like what is the major difference besides the food?
Okay, so State Department works in cones, right? So they have public diplomacy, economics, political cones. What other cones? They got some other cones. They got some cones.
Environment,
so
science,
environment,
technology,
ESTH, environment, science, technology, health,
management,
and they have a management cone. So they run the embassy. That's right. So usually econ and political are the other 2 foreign service State Department people that you would think of, and sometimes they work with us on different projects. Sometimes we're able to get money from State Department to execute some of our projects, but They have a different role in the embassy, and we advise the ambassador very specifically on agricultural issues, trade issues, but we work with those folks to come together on a discussion about trade. Anytime it's trade, agriculture, guaranteed to blow up any trade agreement if we can't come to an agreement on food. That's a really critical issue. What else would you say? How are we different from state?
Well, we are quite small. State is a massive entity, and there are several foreign service organizations within the federal government. So you have the Commercial Service, who is a part of Department of Commerce, USAID. I think you got the defense attaché folks that consider themselves foreign service. And then you have FAS. We are half as big as Foreign Commercial Service, which is the second smallest. So there's only about 150 folks like Kelly and myself, 142 as of today, that are out there in our embassies and consulates across the world. So we know one another quite well. Yeah. We pick up the phone, we call one another when we encounter things that we're like, hey, Kelly, what do I need to do with this? So there's a camaraderie that I don't know that the state would have that.
I think there are 12,000 State Department FSOs, so we are just tiny, but we are also really well networked. And we're different than USAID as well. They also administer the grants and the food aid projects, but they really do it differently than we do. We do it more like a grants program, and we give money to the NGOs, and then we make sure they're executing it correctly, but we just play a different role. We work very differently than UID as well.
And one thing I would say, we are foreign service officers, so we abide by all of these that in some ways are even have more potential than if you were a State Department employee. For example, at any given time, there's usually at least one ambassador that's appointed from the ranks of the Foreign Agricultural Service. So you could probably do a probability study, and I bet you would encounter that Kelly or I have more probability to become an ambassador one day than an entry-level State Department officer. So,
okay. So you mentioned the soft skills that you all are looking for, which RPCVs are a great fit. Capacity building, you're working on that in the field, as well as those interpersonal, intercultural skills that make you an asset as well. But what other technical skills, when we're talking about applying to these positions, do you have to have a background?
Okay. Writing skills.
Right.
Please hone your writing skills. So important. Writing a good email. I know it sounds like something we should all know how to do by now, but if you write a 4-page email to an ambassador, I guarantee you they will read none of it. Yeah. But if you can write a really tight summary and explain, get your points, get very clear, concise points across in an email message, that is very powerful stuff. There's also a lot of editing. In our work, we write many, many reports, and our teams overseas write a lot of reports. So you have a lot of people writing in the second or third language sometimes. And your job is to edit that and make it look right. And that can be a lot of work. So being a strong editor and being a strong writer are two very important technical skills that you have to bring with you to this game. What else would you say?
Well, certainly the analytical aspect as well, because we write a lot of reports that look at crop production and forecasts and what impact that might have on international trade. And so a lot of us would have a pretty strong background in economics. And I think just that kind of analytical, logical way of thinking about things helps you when you are editing these reports. Sometimes if you have a brand new local staff person who's writing a report on soybeans, for example, their logic has to make sense when they piece their assessment into a kind of a global picture. So having the ability to understand how markets work and how numbers work is a very good and essential part of what we do.
And being able to teach that to someone who might not know. That's really tough. That's hard work, but good work.
And all of you are already doing that or have already participated in those type of activities. So just thinking about that as you're going through your list of skills and qualities, your knowledge and abilities, just realizing that a lot of these skill sets you've already gained and used while as Peace Corps volunteers. So get us behind the wall. Like, it's so intimidating applying through USA Jobs, and what are the techniques? What are some things that we need to consider when applying? Adding on to, again, that you mentioned, having great and excellent writing skills and editing skills. What else?
Having some agricultural knowledge and being able to point to that. So I think someone's asking about kind of degrees. I'm an ag economist. What are you?
I'm an ag economist as well.
But in the Foreign Service Training Program, I'm seeing lawyers. I'm seeing people who were grain traders at one point. So people are coming to us more with a more diverse background than it used to be. It used to be we were pretty much all ag economists, but a lot of Peace Corps people.
Yeah.
A tremendous number came back, did an ag economics master's degree, and then came to the Foreign Ag Service. That used to be pretty common, this guy. But then at the same time, we're seeing a different kind of group. Kathy, what do you see as in filling out the forms and some of the things that you're looking for that brings people in? Can you give us some advice from HR world?
Sure. Well, as far as education, we're announcing these positions at the GS11 and the GS12 level, so you can qualify based on either education or specialized experience. And it seems like most people qualify based on some type of experience. For the education at the GS11 level, you need to have 3 full years of higher level graduate education leading towards a PhD in a related field of study. And those fields of study would be something like agricultural marketing, agricultural economics, ag business, or ag or applied economics, things like that. But the specialized experience that you'd be needing to show that you have in order to qualify at that 11 level would be experience performing professional type work in market development, capacity building, which a lot of the Peace Corps volunteers have, or trade policy, or experience assisting with performing market and economic analysis and interpretation. So that's the kind of things we're looking for in order to qualify at the GS11 level. At the GS12 level, you can't qualify based on education. You can only qualify based on specialized experience. And for the 12 level, in order to qualify, you'd have to show that you have experience performing things like market development and capacity building and trade policy. So we'd be looking at some exposure to all of those things. And also that you've got some experience performing professional work in market and economic analysis and interpretation also. So usually at the 12, if somebody has been in some kind of past work experience or something that is pretty much related to the Foreign Service officer stuff. So they might have been working for an NGO or some kind of other organization that does those types of things. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Kathy, this question is actually for you. I see a question that came in, so I just kind of want to intertwine that to what you were saying about the GS levels. Is it possible, or how does someone come in if they're already in the federal government at a GS14? Naturally, I'm sure they're hoping that GS14 will convert, but if the position is 11, 12, what advice do you have on that?
Well, since we're announcing at the 11, 12, and we're assessing and doing the qual at 11, 12, we can only hire at the 11 or 12 level. So if they meet the minimum qualifications for the 12 level and they go through the day-long assessment center and pass that, if they get referred for the selection consideration and are selected, and we were bringing them on, we'd have to bring them on at the 12 level, but we would set their pay as high as we could at the 12-step 10 level to try to match their pay as much as we could. So that's really about all we can do, because these positions are training positions, and the duties have classified out at the 11 and 12 level, so that's really all we can fill them at this time.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. I see those questions. Please keep those questions coming in so our panelists can answer. I see a question that has come in that says, I have a BS in agronomy with minors in international agriculture and anthropology, 2 years Peace Corps. This is very specific. 5 years as GS11 FSA loan officer. Do you suggest I obtain a master's in ag economics?
What do you think, Kathy?
Wow. It's totally up to you, of course. I hate to give you advice of education, but if I saw that as an HR specialist, it's not going to help you qualify or meet the minimum qualified much that you need the specialized experience or this work towards a PhD. It may contribute to that, because you can qualify also based on a combination of experience and education. So it's possible that could help you qualify that way for the 11 level, meeting the combination of experience and education that's required. really hard to say without actually looking at your transcripts and the type of classes you took and all of that stuff. But it can't hurt, even if you do meet the min-quals, you're going to be competing against other people who also meet the min-quals and are getting referred. So if the education is something that kind of increases your kind of marketability and being selected when you're competing against other applicants, I would suggest that you do that. It's totally a personal decision, though. Of course.
Awesome.
I see a couple of questions as well that I'd like to elaborate on. So, for example, another one is, would having a GIS mapping background be a good asset for FAS? There is another aspect of Foreign Agricultural Service, which is our civil service side. So we are foreign service officers. There's about 150 of us. And then here in Washington, D.C., we have about, 600 or 800? I think 600 to 800 civil servants. So they can be in all sorts of technical aspects of what we do. And there is one division that does exactly that GIS mapping type of work, looking at satellite imagery and coming up with crop forecasts, well into the future. And for Darren's question, there are other parts of FAS where having an agronomy background and your other experience as an FSA loan officer would possibly give you a job as a civil servant, and then you could come stick your toe in the water, see how well you like it. You get a chance to, very likely, to travel to some of our posts overseas. We do TDYs as well. So if the foreign service lifestyle is not for you, you really want to stay here in the U.S., you could still have a job that would, on an annual basis, probably get you out to a foreign country where you could, still engage and learn about agriculture in another country for, from days to weeks or maybe even months at a time.
So is there an entry exam?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are working on releasing the position announcement on USA Jobs, and that'll open in October, and it should be open for a month. Right, Kathy?
Yep, that's right.
And then the plan is in November, we will do the assessment, or the candidates for the assessment, we call it the assessment, will be selected, and then we'll do the assessment in collaboration with APHIS in December. And then by January, hopefully, we will contact the candidates that we'd like to make job offers to.
So a couple of things. Can you go over what the assessment involves and APHIS for those who are not familiar with that acronym, Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, correct? All right. Yeah. So we're big on acronyms in federal government. So,
I think APHIS is recruiting for a very specific veterinary background, plant science background, agronomy probably. I don't know much about what they're recruiting for.
But your assessment?
Our assessment is a full day program, and it's we're doing it here in Washington, D.C., and we usually have about 400 or 500 people apply to join the assessment, and then how many people actually did it? Do you remember?
Oh, I can't recall.
Oh, gosh. There must have been about, I think, like 100 or so.
About 100?
Maybe a little bit less than 100. And it took 2 weeks to get everybody put through the assessment center last time.
Okay, so the assessment center is a 5-part exam. You do a group exercise, you do a structured interview, there's an advocacy exercise, there's a client services exercise, and there's a leadership and supervision role play. So those 5 elements you are evaluated on. We have people coming in from the Foreign Agricultural Service to evaluate people, from the State Department, retired Foreign Service, retired Foreign Service from Foreign Ag Service, from the State Department, from APHIS, as well as civil servants to evaluate everyone who's doing the full day assessment. So it's a very robust assessment program. We work with a contractor to make sure there's like a psychological evaluation. There's a lot of pieces to it. So I think we've really changed how we bring people into the service compared to how when Dwight and I applied, it was a very different process. And we are hoping we get the very best candidates. Last time we did the assessment, we ended up making offers to 22 of the people that took the assessment. And today we have 16 foreign service trainees currently in Washington. A few have been assigned of the people, so we have some that are already in language training. But so we have 16 who will probably mostly be bidding this fall on around postings.
So question, if the assessment is done here in DC, what do you suggest for those candidates that I see we have people watching from different countries? Do they have to be present for that?
Yes, they have to be present for that. And I know this because I have an intern in Germany, and she applied and was accepted to take the assessment, and she flew from Germany to do it. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, and FAS doesn't cover the cost for the travel and lodging and all
No,
that.
we don't, unfortunately.
Okay, so I'm gonna repeat that again. FAS does not cover the cost of travel and lodging, but it's an amazing opportunity.
It's a crazy opportunity. You should really explore if this sounds like something you'd want to do.
So you talked about the timeline, but like specifically from start to finish, about how long once the application is submitted, from review to actually getting into the assessment and training until you're actually. And another question is, are you overseas? Or are you stationed here? What's the time frame?
You answer that?
Sure. Well, maybe perhaps Kathy can answer the question about the assessment and then when they come into the building.
I can. Yeah. Once the announcement closes, it's probably about 2 or 3 months before people come on board at the earliest. So once the announcement closes, we have to run the assessment center and, review everybody's minimum qualifications first to make sure they're qualified. So that takes some time. But so once the announcement closes, it's probably about a month until the assessment center happens, and another month after that when we start making selections. So that's 2 months. And then once someone is selected, referred out, they pass the assessment center, they're referred out for selection, they're selected. We have to obtain a security clearance, top secret, and a worldwide medical clearance. So that takes some time too, especially the security clearance. So it can take anywhere from a month after selection to 8 to 12 months, depending on how well the security clearance goes, what they run into, if it's some kind of issues that takes longer for them to make a determination, it can run over. So I'd say you can come on board anywhere between 8 and 12 months after the announcement closes, maybe a little earlier if you don't have any issues during the security clearance checks and all that.
Okay, and then once that happens, you are invited to come into the building. We find you a job. We call it an FSC rotation. So you would be put into one of our technical program areas across FAS, which are typically 1 year. Each rotation is 1 year. And during that first year, you would be required to take 2 training courses. There is one called Ag 100, which gives you a pretty, 80,000 foot perspective of what it is FAS does, the kinds of things you encounter in an overseas office, and just a whole huge gamut of stuff. And then that one is followed by Ag. That one is much more focused on your writing skills, the analytical skills, and what it is that makes a good report, how we engage on trade policy, some much more focused things than you would have picked up on in the Ag 100. So then you would do those 2 courses your first year. At the same time, you're doing your other job, so it can be quite demanding. Then you would be placed in another rotation for the second year, and then possibly even a third year you would do a rotation. And I would say you can't be assigned to another country until you've at least completed the Ag 100 and the Ag 200, and I believe you have to be at the GS 12 too. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Kathy?
definitely.
And so then once you, perhaps a year, the very quickest that you would even be assigned, and then once you do get assigned, depending on where it might be, you would get anywhere from 6 to 9 or 10 months of language training, and then you would have to meet a qualifying language score before you fly to your first assignment, and then that's when the fun begins.
And in what language? Any language or?
The language specific to the posting.
Correct.
Really? Okay.
And each language requires a different level of proficiency based on how hard it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do extremely well, you pass your language with a qualifying score or higher, you get language incentive pay.
Good money.
Yeah, it can be very good.
Yeah.
So based on your experience, are job announcements in FAS fairly common or fairly rare? How often do you post to USA Jobs? When can they expect this announcement to go live?
October, this announcement will go live. Kathy, it's been every couple of years, right?
Yeah, typically, one time it was just 1 year between numbers. It's based on need and funding too, basically. But every year or maybe every other year. This year we're going to be doing something a little bit different, though. We're going to go ahead and do the announcement, run the assessment center, and have our eligible applicant pool after that's over. And we're going to try to maintain it for 2 years now instead of 1 year, so that if additional vacancies pop out, if someone isn't, they pass all that, and they're not selected this first go around, we're going to maintain them in our applicant inventory and consider them for the next round of hiring. So that's something new for us, so that the applicants don't have to retake the assessment center again the next year. So we're going to try that this year and see how it goes.
So that's only for our foreign service jobs. And Kathy,
right.
What would you say, how frequently do civil service jobs announcements get posted? Do you have any insight?
Yeah, that's based on need too, but FAS, they have hiring needs that go up and go down. Right now they're hiring again, and it's supposed to be on USA jobs. So it's just kind of, it changes all the time, so it's really hard to say. But if you go on USA jobs and create an automated search to search for jobs with USDA, Foreign Agricultural Service in Washington, D.C., they will all come up and you'll automatically be sent email notifications so that you don't miss them. So I recommend that to everybody who's interested in working for FAS.
And this job does not require non-competitive eligibility. I know a lot of Peace Corps volunteers receive NCE, but it's not necessary when applying.
That's correct. This job is going to be open to all U.S. citizens, so you don't need that special hiring authority eligibility to apply. So you're applying just like any other U.S. citizen. But if you are a Peace Corps volunteer, it's good to put that in your resume, and it's good to maybe, if you have an non-competitive eligibility letter, to go ahead and submit that. Just so that if you do end up passing the assessment center and getting referred for selection, the people who are making the selections are aware of that. It does mean something for sure. So make sure to include that when you apply.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kathy. And also in applying, I saw a question in there that just said, really, how do they make themselves really stand out, especially when you're in a pool of candidates? Everyone's highly qualified, and it's competitive service. So any special suggestions for them as far as really honing in on their unique skill set?
I do have some suggestions, and thanks for giving me the time.
Yes, absolutely.
First off, when we posted vacancy announcement, like every other announcement on USA Jobs you've applied before, there's an online occupational assessment questionnaire that you respond to as an applicant. And when you're responding to those questions, make sure to be honest in your responses. They're like task-based questions or behavioral-based questions, and you choose the response that best fits your experience or your whatever. So be honest when you're choosing those responses, but also be careful not to underrate yourself. I've noticed in all my years that people do have a tendency to underrate themselves more than overrate themselves. So that's key, and it's important when you're first applying, because you're going to receive a numerical rating based on those responses to those occupational questions on that USA Jobs application. So if you don't meet that best qualified score, you're not even going to get invited to the assessment center. So make sure to, show your best self when you're responding to those questions. But you do have to also make sure that when you're developing your resume, and the resume that you're submitting with this application package has to show that you really do have the experience that you claimed in your applicational questions, responses. So it's important to spend some time working on your resume and tailoring it to this job. Look at the vacancy announcement. Look and see what the minimum qualification requirements are. We list specific examples of what specialized experience is, and make sure that your resume, if appropriate, shows that you have that. We're going to be looking at that, and we're going to be looking at your resume compared to other people's resume when they're making selections too. So it's important to put everything in your resume that you can to sell yourself to a hiring official, when they're looking at you competing against someone else. Also, make sure to send a copy of your college transcript, even if you're not qualified based on education only. It's still good to submit your transcript so that the hiring officials can see what your educational background is, your coursework, all of that stuff. Let's see. And don't worry about your resume being too long in the federal government. Like in private industry, they always tell you to keep it to 1 or 2 pages. That doesn't really apply when you're applying for jobs in the federal government. I think the more you can put to let people know about your background, the better off you are in the federal government. So don't worry about that too much. Do you think that answers everybody's question about that?
I'm content with that response. It's pretty much about tailoring your resume, making sure that you review the actual announcement and you pull from that announcement things that are relative to the job and that you actually qualify for, and also making sure that you're honest with it, and especially when doing that initial survey, the qualifications. So
don't underrate yourself.
Don't underrate yourself.
I think that's my takeaway.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can also submit a cover letter with your application package if you'd like to, just to show why you're interested and why you think you'd be a good candidate for this. That sometimes helps when it comes down to where the selecting official has a whole list of people in front of them and they're trying to choose one over the other. So I always recommend doing a cover letter, just introducing yourself and saying why you feel like you'd be a great fit for this position. That helps too.
So y'all actually read the cover letters?
I'm sorry, what?
You actually read the cover letters? Because a lot of times you think, oh, okay, you just need the resume, especially if you're applying through USDA jobs. Cover letters are important.
I read cover letters because I want to see how well you write.
Okay.
Exactly. We do. We first look at the resume, and if we don't see qualifying specialized experience there, we'll do a quick check at the cover letters too to make sure it's not buried in there somewhere. So we're doing our best to qualify people because we want good candidates. So we look everywhere. Everything that's submitted to us, we look at.
That is great advice. And just a nice little tidbit that cover letters are a good way to see how well someone writes.
So get it proofread by a friend.
Right. Read, review.
That's right.
Okay. Awesome. So there's so many questions coming in. I want to make sure that I get to everyone's questions. But really quickly, can you walk us through like the average day of FAS?
No average days. Never.
No.
Was there ever an average day?
The day that the asteroid strike?
Yes. Every day is different.
Every day is different, and it depends on where you are. Trade negotiations might be happening in one corner of the world.
Yeah.
A massive weather event might have affected crops that you're covering in another part of the world. So it just really depends. It is very fast paced, I will say, especially in an embassy. You have, not only do you have your chain of command with USDA, then you also have your chain of command within the embassy. So ambassadors often ask you, hey, what's going on down in the southern part of the country? Can you draft us some cable fodder for that? And so you can be very busy. I wouldn't say it's ever boring.
Never boring. When an ambassador says jump, you say how high.
Yes.
So it's kind of funny to have multiple bosses sometimes, and that can be a challenge.
It can be very tricky.
Yeah, you have to really learn how to prioritize your work, and you're managing staff. You have them to deal with,
and the soft skills are very important when you have to do that.
Yeah, and we're all speaking English, but we're not speaking the same language, is what I've often said. My first job, we had, I don't know how many nationalities in the office anymore, and we had some real miscommunications occasionally, and it took a lot of finessing to get everybody back together and agree it's okay. And even one year we were going to do just a Christmas party organization, and I said, we'll do it at my house, we'll all bring food, it'll be a potluck. And then the staff, while I was gone, decided, nope, we're all ordering Thai food, and we all order our own food because that means we get what we want. And I was like, whatever, guys. But so I thought we'd agreed. Actually, we hadn't. So that's just a minor example. But you could be in trade negotiations for days on end, and yet you're also being called to produce, your regular scheduled reports. And how are you going to manage that? Your first tour, I saw someone asked about doing a consular tour. No, you do not have to do that. Big advantage. We don't do the consular tour, but you can be the duty officer, which is the person that has the emergency phone at night and on the weekends. And then you'll have some excellent stories to tell your friends, which you shouldn't repeat, but maybe you would. So lots of crazy things happen overseas, people acting out, doing things they'd never do if they were at home, but they do it in foreign countries for some unknown reason. As someone mentioned, what about serving abroad with a family of 3? Mm-hmm. I always tell the new Foreign Service trainees, the best part about your first tour is you're going to have a home that's way bigger than you could ever afford in Washington, D.C. if you were working there previously. So the accommodations are usually very good. In my opinion, they can be bad, but there's a whole process. If you have housing that's not appropriate or for some reason has a problem, there are people to help you work through that. So, they will accommodate your family size. And if your family grows dramatically while you're at a post, they might even move you to a bigger place if it's required. So I feel like the housing is usually pretty good. And
yeah, I
I have nothing to complain about.
I've been very pleased with our housing. Some of the nicest homes I will ever live in have been
here.
overseas. And another component to this is in many countries, household help is extremely cheap. We've had multiple people help us in our house. We have twins, and that's a handful when you're starting out. So we've had so much more help than we could ever afford here, which is quite a stress relief.
Yeah, that's true.
So I just want to mention to everyone watching that our wonderful guest, FAS, will be at our upcoming career fair, September 6th at the Washington Marriott Wardman Park. So if you're planning on attending, don't forget to register. And also they will be there. They're not accepting applications at the event, but they are there to guide you through the process and go a little bit more in depth and give you that one-on-one attention should you need it. So again, that is going to be our career fair, September 6th from 4 to 7. And you can find all the information online at our Peace Corps Third Goal page. So going back into it, we have a couple minutes left. And so if you have any more questions, please go ahead and submit them. I see another question that comes in. What is the hardest part of your job?
Uncertainty, right? Like you don't know where you're going to be in 6 years, or that's being far away from your family and friends, missing funerals and babies being born.
Or some of the most stressful times I've had are when there are unfortunate health things that might happen overseas, and there is a medical unit in just about every embassy and consulate out there, and if something is crosses the capacity of the local country to address, then you can get medevaced. And I have had that experience, and it's really not fun, but you do have a safety net when those kinds of things occur.
I can tell.
Yeah. So really quickly, just in your own words, like why the RPCV? Why recruit from us? I know why. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, why I thought we were great, but from your own mouths, your own words.
Well, you speak. You're RPC.
Well, okay, so I cannot imagine doing any other job with my life, really. If I hadn't done Peace Corps, then I certainly would not be in this job. So if you have been bitten by this bug that you want to travel internationally, I think this is about as good as it gets. If you're a Peace Corps, you can roll in places that are not so savory. I think it's just a natural good fit. And I think if you counted the numbers, perhaps we know, I would guess at least a quarter to a third of us are RPCVs. So there's some self-selection that happens.
I don't know what it is about Peace Corps, and maybe you get exposed to embassies overseas, but there's a strong attraction for foreign act service. And I think, like Dwight said, those people who come in with that natural curiosity and they want to understand other cultures, they have some of those soft diplomatic skills that will help them go far. They've been very successful in our agency. And I think if there's at least a third of them are foreign service officers must be Peace Corps, I think.
And I think we have demonstrated we're pretty flexible people. Yeah. And that is key to being in FAS because at least on the foreign service side, we have to change our job every 3 to 4 years, if not sooner. So if you have I call it professional ADD, this is the perfect job. Operations behind, and this is perfect for that. So if that's your calling, FAS is calling you.
Is there ever a time when the opportunity or the window closes? I'm seeing questions that are related to when's the best time to apply? Can they apply still if there's a gap in their resume, or will the window of opportunity close?
Kathy, can you answer that? That might be.
Yeah, applicants can apply or submit application materials anytime while the vacancy announcement is open. So through midnight Eastern Central Time of the closing date of the vacancy announcement, you can resubmit a new resume, or you can answer the occupational assessment questions again, all the way up to the closing date of the announcement. So midnight and the closing date.
Okay, perfect. All right. A special thanks again to my wonderful panelists. Any other final thoughts? Anything you want to close on? You want RPCVs to consider?
Well, I see someone asked, are we asking the right questions? I think you are asking a lot of the right questions. There are so many questions to answer. And as I've come into this job with the Foreign Service trainees, I don't know all the answers, and I've been in this for a long time. So keep asking questions, stay curious, and check us out. And we'll be opening these jobs in October on USA Jobs. I hope you apply and take a chance with us because it's the most exciting job I could have ever dreamt of with my agricultural background.
Yeah.
My parents always say, we never saw this one coming, and I'm like, me neither. So it's a really great role to play and serve American agriculture.
Yeah, and if you like challenges, this is a perpetual challenge. Like I said, we change jobs every 3 to 4 years. So by the time you master one job, then you move on into another one, like Kelly did last, 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
and is learning a whole nother skill set. So it's kind of like an entire career of learning new things, which is really great.
Is that your favorite part of the job?
I think so. Yeah.
I think our friend Sarah Hansen said it best. She said, every time you go to a new country, it's like you get a master's degree, a new master's degree, because you have to learn everything about that agricultural sector. You have to be the expert, and then you have to be able to translate what we're doing in the United States to them, explain why what we're doing is important and why it matters, and explain why what we want to do with them matters. So it's, you really have to go deep in agriculture at least, and I think comparing it to getting a master's degree in that country is very reasonable. So.
And one last thing I will say, I never envisioned that I would work in agriculture. No, not at all. And I never really thought that agriculture was a sexy field. Most of my friends growing up were in their parents were worked for IBM or tech stuff or doctors or whatever. But one day I realized that agriculture is a very sexy field when I was trying to sell bull semen in Vietnam. So
whoa,
there you go.
So sexy.
All right. And lastly, before we close, quick question for the PCVs currently serving Peace Corps volunteers in the field who are still serving, they're interested in applying. Should they go ahead and apply now because the process may take a little long before they actually get to the assessment, or do you suggest that they just wait until the close of their service?
I mean, the assessment happens in December.
Okay.
So that would be, can you get to Washington in December to do an assessment? Don't you think, Kathy, that would be the defining factor?
Definitely, yeah, you've got to do that, and then there's no way of knowing how quickly you're going to get cleared if you get selected, so you have to be available, when your selection's made. And if you're still in the Peace Corps, you may not be able to start with FAS right away.
Okay, all right, so that pretty much concludes this webinar, again, featuring USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service. Thank you again to the many wonderful panelists here and on the phone. And I just want to make sure that every question was addressed. And if it wasn't, join us at the Peace Corps Career Fair, again, September 6th. You'll be there.
I'll be there, yeah.
Kelly will be there.
With a recent Foreign Service trainee who's working for us. So.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to say too, when the vacancy comes out, the vacancy announcement on USA Jobs, there's going to be a lot of information in there. We'll also have a contact for you to call here in HR, probably me, if you have any questions about the application process or anything like that. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions. We're also going to have, last year we had a Foreign Service guide that was attached to the announcement, so you can go on and look about all kinds of information about what Foreign Service officers do and all of that. So just make sure you watch USA Jobs for that announcement.
Perfect, thank you. And that was actually one of the questions, is how can they get in contact with you directly if they have questions? Again, going to USA Jobs is kind of hard. It feels like you submit your application, it's out there in the ether. So Kathy has volunteered to share her contact information, is that correct?
Well, it will be in the vacancy announcement. We actually put that right in there in email so that people can email us with questions.
Awesome. So there you have it. And again, be on the lookout for that vacancy announcement, which will come out in October. See you all at the career fair if you're planning on attending. And best of luck as you apply to the Foreign Agricultural Service. All right. Take care, and until the next Employer Spotlight. Looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.